So, one evening while watching some Elden Ring speedrunners, my husband commented that he wondered about the DLC boss Divine Beast Dancing Lion having a weak point on the head. When I asked why that wouldn't really be the case, he said it was because of the way that it's a puppet, so wouldn't the weak points be the performers? Which made me realize that I should do a whole video on this. So today, we are going to talk about why this boss is actually a real dancing lion. Let's start with doing a more in-depth look on the boss. From the moment the DLC was first announced, I thought this boss was just such a super cool design. It was obvious from the first look that this was a different kind of design for a boss. In this, it's two humanoid figures manipulating a puppet of the Divine Beast, moving the figure around. Zuli the Witch on YouTube did a video of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion showing that the model for the boss actually does have these humanoid figures programmed in. The story behind the boss is that these divine beasts were once messengers of the heavens. People, called the Sculpted Keepers, used representations of these divine beasts to perform rituals such as the one for the lion dance. However, once Mesmer came, the ritual turned to more martial means, and the once divine creatures were used for army or, in some theories, for sport. So, let's talk about this. The ritual of the dancing lion in Elden Ring is very reminiscent of the dancing lion rituals from China. In fact, rituals like this are not exactly abnormal, nor are they unique to either China or FromSoft. Masked rituals and other similar ones in which performers dress in costume or mask are enacted as a way to bring the divine, or whatever figure is being represented, to life, temporarily, among them. Oftentimes, this performance is a reenactment of the feats and narratives of the figures the performers are representing. In these various rituals, the identity of the performer and the identity of the performed become enmeshed. There are a lot of different ways to explain this. In a more theatrical sense, we have Richard Chechner's distinction between make-believe and make-belief. Make-believe is something that we're probably used to talking about or thinking about. It's the childish as-if play where we are consciously aware of the distinctions present between reality and fiction, our separation of what is us and what is the played actor. Make-belief, on the other hand, intentionally blurs these boundaries. In other words, some performances are meant to be more real than others, and to purposefully bring the real into the play and the play into the real is actually the point of the performance. Now, just a real quick note on the idea of play before we move on. In Western thought, we think of play as something childish and unimportant. Play is something we grow out of, and it is not something worthy of actual adult consideration. This has had a really strong impact on academic approaches to play, where play is either considered part of a childhood study, or academics make leaps to try and justify their study. The term serious play, for example, has been used by sociologists and academics such as Sherry Ortner and Tanya Luhrmann. Even Clifford Geertz's conception of deep play attempts to paint play as something actually socially relevant. However, both deep play and serious play have a side effect. By saying, this play is different, this play is serious, we are still maintaining the conception of play as something frivolous. It's not that all play is serious, that all play is worthy of attention, but that this play in particular is serious and important. So when I say play, I don't mean that it's frivolous or childish, but that it's actually serious and important, though that doesn't take away from the fun, performative actions of play. Not because it's different than other play, but because that's just what play is. It is important. It is always in some level serious, but also not always to the same level or at the same time. Ritual is a really great example of this. It's a form of play that is typically considered different. But what paints ritual as different than other forms of play is all in the categorization of the moment, typically one painted by outsiders looking in. So let's look at the dance of the Divine Beast for this. In the lore of the world, this ritual was an important act for the Hornsent, one which allowed the community to connect to the heavens through their messengers, the divine beasts. After Mesmer's conquering, however, the beasts were put to different purposes, mostly in a military sense. While militaries can still have their rituals, the purposes, activities, and engagements have become different. These kinds of alterations happen all the time to ritual, other forms of action, myth, especially when colonization occurs. But which activities, at what points, are considered what kinds of rituals? These definitions are amorphous, they are constantly changing, and they're really up to interpretation. But that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. Anyway, if we think about ritual in terms of Chechner's make-believe, where the boundaries of the real and the play are blurred, we have another note to make about the notion of real. Reality is the dimensions of the possible. In other words, our conception of reality is based on what we consider to be possible in the world. Therefore, reality is something that can be entirely culturally based. For some of you watching this video, the idea of speaking to God and hearing responses back, whether actually or symbolically, is probably an idea that sounds very unrealistic and therefore impossible. For many others of you watching this, it's entirely possible and quite probable, and maybe even an everyday experience for you. Let me tell you a story. Back when I used to teach at a university, we used to have the first-year students do a fieldwork project. They were asked to go to some kind of religious service, because I taught religious studies, and to do a little report. The city we were in had a spiritualist church, which sat very near to the university, so many students saw an opportunity to have a bit of fun. Spiritualist churches are known for their communication with the dead, an experience that many students found impossible. Therefore, they thought they would be able to have a little laugh while doing their project. We ended up having to stop doing this project because so many students who went to the spiritualist church, or other non-Christian churches, had an existential crisis and mental breakdown because they experienced something outside of their conception of reality. Now, you may roll your eyes at this, but do remember that so did my students before they went. The point is this. Many cultures have conceptions of what's possible, which may or may not line up with what you personally see as possible. So when we have a performance which blurs the boundaries and conceptions of what is reality or what can be possible, creating an effect on the real, this is fully within the realms of their reality. And I know, I'm talking about a video game at the end of the day, which is not real. We can all probably agree on that. But a lot of Elden Ring is based on very real cultures and ideas. The Dancing Lion Divine Beast is based on Chinese lion dances. Some of the languages and mythologies are derived from Welsh and Old English. There are connections to the meat world in a lot of fiction. In many ways, we can use our engagement with fiction to do a reverse, almost, of Chechner's make-believe. By playing in these spaces and thinking about them seriously, we can also reveal new ideas that can affect our understanding of the reality outside of these play spaces. So let's talk about more physical meat world stuff for a second. Let's talk about masks and masked performances. These are quite common in a lot of areas of the world, including the Americas and Asia. Our Chinese lion dance can in many ways be described as a masked performance, a masked rituals in which performers wear their costume and perform. However, calling them costumes and performances can actually be detrimental to really understanding what's happening in these rituals. When someone puts on a mask in these types of dances, there is a direct play happening between the identities of the performed and the performer. The mask represents the otherness, whether this is a god or a messenger of the gods or a mythic hero, but the mask also has an ambiguity to it, because it is both of this supernatural or other figure, as well as for the very human entity to wear it. The otherness it represents becomes both an obstacle for the performer, who is unable to be fully a god, or whatever the figure is, but also is ultimately the goal. I talked about this a bit more in depth on my video on Orville Peck's mask, if you are interested. But essentially, these performances are a direct mixing of identities. The person wearing the mask is not just a person in a costume. They are that other entity, though only temporarily. In that moment, the play of make-believe is very real, very serious, and very actualized in the world. The performance and the performed are the same. So, essentially, the two figures hidden under the costume of the dragon in Elden Ring are not just figures in a costume. During the entirety of their performance, they are the lion. They are not figures manipulating a mask or a costume. The mask's otherness has come alive. This is why they are able to channel the powers of the lion's identity, because the lion is there, in the room. They are just the conduits for it to happen. So yes, the lion's head is the weak point, because this performance is not playing as if the lion is real, but it actually is.